I was the last human without implants, no neural mesh, no reflex amplifiers, no dermal graphene. Just blood, bone, and a stubborn streak hardwired into my DNA like some ancient survival glitch. The med techs call me a baseline. The others, those sleek, chrome-eyed paragons of posthuman perfection, call me obsolete, but command call me something else. Insurance. The war started before I was born. A slow grind between the Union of Worlds and the Varkari Dominion, fueled by resource hunger and mutual paranoia. When the Union realized they were outmatched biologically, they did what humans always do when faced with extinction. They reinvented themselves, piece by piece, nerve by neuron, until the line between soldier and machine blurred completely. Now they move faster than thought, fought with hive-mind coordination, and could kill from orbit with a single blink. I couldn't do any of that, but I could disappear. That's what made me valuable, undetectable by Dominion AI, who were trained to track the digital footprints of augmented soldiers. The implants that made my brothers and sisters into gods also made them visible, predictable, traceable. Me, I was noise, static in their systems, a meat sack ghost. My mission was supposed to be a suicide run, drop onto Varkari Prime, sneak past their orbital sensors, detonate a localized grav core charge beneath their planetary shield array, crippling their homeworld's defense grid just long enough for our upgraded fleet to punch a hole through their atmosphere. Simple, right? Except nothing's ever simple in war, especially when you're the only analog relic in a digital battlefield. The drop pod screamed through the upper atmosphere like a meteor on fire. No autocorrections, no biofeedback stabilizers. Just my hands on cold manual controls and the heat of entry rattling every rivet. I slammed into the planet's surface with a bone-jarring crunch, cracking 2 ribs and biting through my lip. Pain was real for me, not dulled by subdermal nanites or filtered through neurochem-balanced software. But pain was good. Pain meant I was still alive. I crawled from the pod into a jungle of twisted obsidian trees and silver leaf vines. Varkari Prime wasn't lush in the way Earth had been. Everything here shimmered with sharp angles and alien geometry. The sky pulsed a dull violet, and the sun cast a shadow in 2 directions. They told me I had 12 hours to reach the shield array. My tracker was an analog map etched into my forearm. Etched, not projected. I used a compass, not a satellite link. Every tool I carried was mechanical, handcrafted. Nothing digital. Nothing the Dominion could see. Halfway through the trek, I saw one of the new soldiers, Corporal Lyra, upgraded to Revision 6.3. She was pinned against a shattered transport hull, half of her face gone, sparks twitching from where her implant core should have been. She looked at me, not with anger, not with judgment, but with something like envy. "They shut us down mid-jump," she said weakly, like flipping a switch. We didn't even get to fight. I took her sidearm, an old-school plasma bolter, and left her with my morphine injector. She wouldn't need it for long. As I neared the ridge overlooking the Varkari shield generator, I realized something was wrong. There were no patrols, no drones, no ambient hum from the shield core. Then I saw it, a dark figure standing alone on the generator platform. He was tall, slender, not Varkari. He looked human, but not like me. "Colonel James Ward," the figure said, his voice rippling like an echo across glass. "Baseline, you're not supposed to be here." He stepped closer, and I saw the Union crest glowing beneath his collarbone. He was one of ours, or had been, but his skin gleamed with iridescent alloy. His eyes had no whites, just swirling vortices of light. "Unit designation, Archon 1, he said, bowing slightly. "We found peace, James. Unity, you should have upgraded." I raised the bolter. Maybe, but someone had to remember what we were fighting for. He smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "You're already extinct." Then he lunged. I'd fought upgraded soldiers before, but this was something else. He moved like thought, fluid and human. Every strike was calculated, optimized, but I had one advantage. I was irrational. He anticipated what should have worked. I did what shouldn't. A feint left, a roll into the dirt. I grabbed a shard of broken armor plating and jammed it into the socket behind his left eye. He roared, a distortion field flaring out from his chest, and knocked me across the platform. My body screamed in protest. Bones cracked. Blood filled my mouth. But he staggered. He could be hurt. I triggered the grav core. He froze. "You'll die too," he hissed. "Yeah," I said, smiling through the pain. "But you'll go first." The blast took out the shield generator, the platform, and everything within a 2-kilometer radius. Command confirmed the fleet's penetration minutes later. They won't say my name in the reports. They'll talk about a covert agent, a tactical anomaly. But you and I know the truth. One human refused the upgrade and still won the war. They pulled me from the crater 3 hours after detonation. Half my bones shattered, lungs half collapsed in the shockwave. Skin charred with a grav core surge had kissed me. Any upgraded soldier would have died clean or rebooted. Me? I just bled. The evac team looked at me like I was something ancient, like I'd crawled from a museum exhibit. "You're lucky," one of them said. No, I was stubborn. There's a difference. They dragged me into the med bay of the Valkyrie-class battleship, Resolute Fong. I passed out under a chorus of sterile lights and the quiet whispers of machines that didn't know what to do with a man who didn't sink. When I woke, Commander Venn was standing at the edge of the bed, still in his black command synthweave, still more machine than man. He was one of the early adopted, the first wave of officers to undergo the full neurorefactor. That meant he didn't blink, didn't sweat, and didn't have a damn soul left behind those silver eyes. "You're off the grid, Ward," he said, arms folded behind his back. "No med logs, no telemetry. You've created a political mess." I coughed blood onto my sheet. "We won. That's not the point." "Oh, but it was..." And he knew it. The Union had built its strategy around perfect soldiers. Predictable, modular, standardized excellence. But I'd broken that narrative. A ghost had slipped through the net and done what 1 billion credits worth of enhancements couldn't. That made people nervous. 2 days later, they moved me to a low-orbit facility above Terra 9. Not a prison, not quite, but the walls were still steel, and the guards still watched me through mirrored lenses. I wasn't a hero. I was a variable, and variables get contained. That's where I met her. Dr. Elaine Murr, civilian scientist, biological neuralist. Her lab coat looked out of place among all the sleek-bodied tacticians and chrome-jointed strategists. She was one of the few left untouched by military-grade upgrades. Rumor said she refused augmentation, even when offered. Said she wanted to understand the human mind without corrupting it. That made 2 of us. "You're a myth now," she said, pulling up a stool beside my cot. "The man who won without wires." Sounds better than it felt. She chuckled. "Your cortical scans are fascinating. The patterns, primitive, chaotic. But they adapt in ways our synthetic minds don't. When you fought Archon 1, you did things no logic tree could predicted." "Because I'm stupid," I said dryly. "Because you're human," she countered. That word had started to mean something else these days. Human used to mean messy, emotional, volatile. Now it meant outdated. It meant weak. But to her, it meant resilient. That's when I realized she wasn't here to study me. She was here to recruit me. "The Dominion isn't done," she said next day. "You blew a hole in their shield grid, yes, but their fleets are rebuilding faster than expected. And now, they're adapting to the upgrades. They're learning our logic trees." I felt the knot forming. That means our soldiers are predictable, even the best. She pulled up a hollow map and rotated the display. A red zone flared on the galactic fringe. "What's that?" I asked. "Sector R Alpha 19. Dead space." Or it was. Now it's lighting up with Dominion signatures. No one goes there. Too far. Too unstable. Too unstructured. And you want to send me. No implants. No signal trail. You're the only one who can go dark enough. They gave me a ship. The Wayward Sun ancient stealth vessel. Pre-upgrade era. Manual controls. No AI. No link to the Union grid. It was ugly, Scars on its hull, analog readouts, humming reactors that wheeze like an old dog, but it felt right. Like me, it had survived a time it wasn't built for. My mission? Infiltrate the anomaly zone. Identify what the Dominion was building, and if possible, shut it down. Simple, which meant it wouldn't be. As I left orbit, the stars opened up like scars across velvet. I sat in that cockpit, hand steady on the throttle, breath fogging the glass. The silence was pure. No neural chatter. No synthetic overlays. Just me and the cold vacuum between stars. That's when I realized something else. The Dominion wasn't the only enemy anymore. Back home, my own people had started calling me the Relic. The brass whispered about removing all uncontrolled assets, about closing the chapter on human irregularities. In the shadows, beneath the metal and code, a new war was brewing, not just for survival, but for the soul of what humanity was. And I would not go quietly. There's a silence to deep space that no machine can simulate. No hum of circuitry. No steady pulse of a synced neural net. Just the sound of your own breath, slow and unsteady, and the creaking hull of an old ship fighting against the cold. I was 10 hours into our Alpha 19 when the black got weird. The stars thinned. Not just a visual illusion. Gone, truly gone, as if the fabric of space had forgotten where to hang them. The NAV system started drifting. Not failing, drifting. Like the coordinates wanted to be wrong. The wayward sun had no AI. But even the analog sensors began to stutter. My magnetic compass twitched like a dying insect. My chronometer ticked unevenly. Then came the static. No signal, just a hiss. But buried deep in that noise, something moved. A voice. Not human. Not Dominion. Something older. I found the Dominion fleet, or what was left of it, drifting near a shattered moon. Ships were cracked open like tin cans. Some still powered. Most silent. No battle debris. No energy signatures from a known weapon. Just absence. I ran a passive scan. Careful not to emit. There was movement. Something shifting between the dead vessels. Not Valkyrie fighters. Not drones. Shapes. They didn't fly. They floated. Like they were made of thought more than mass. Their forms were inconsistent. Vaguely insectoid one moment, fractal the next. Looking at them too long gave me a headache behind the eyes, like my brain refused to translate what it saw. And then one of them looked back. Not turned. Looked. My screen fuzzed out. The temperature dropped. Then I heard it, inside the ship, inside my mind. You are not bound to the code. You are not infected with order. I froze. My fingers hovered above the manual override. The voice returned. Not speech. Not sound. But intent translated through instinct. You are unprocessed. Wild. Organic without pattern. You belong. I slammed the emergency thrusters and burned away from the anomaly. Hours passed. Or maybe days. Time to work right in our Alpha 19. My fuel reserves dropped faster than they should have. My internal clock kept resetting. But I didn't stop until the black behind me felt less deep. Then I sent a narrow beam message to Dr. Murr. Just 3 words. They're not Valkyrie. She didn't reply right away. When she did, her voice trembled. We suspected this. We thought the Dominion found something in the dead zones. Artifacts, maybe technology. We didn't know they woke something up. What are they? I asked. We called them the architects. I frowned. We. There was a pause. There's a group off-grid. Scientists. Dissidents. Veterans. People who never upgraded or who regret it. We've been watching the Dominion's neural patterns for months. Some of their soldiers started going dark. Not dead. Not rogue. Just changed. Possessed? No. Not in the religious sense. More like overwritten. I docked at a derelict Union listening post floating on the edge of a red dwarf's gravity well. No Union signals. No Dominion traces. That's where I met the others. They called themselves the Null Order. 10 humans. No implants. No mods. One even wore glasses, actual glass, strapped her face like it was 1980. They weren't soldiers, but they weren't naive either. They'd seen what the war had done to both sides, what it was becoming. There's a pattern. One of them, an old Navy engineer named Ricks, told me. The Dominion didn't just upgrade. They invited the architects in. That's what gave them their edge. But now, the architects are rewriting both sides. Dominion and Union. All the systems are converging. Toward what? Singularity, he said grimly. Not the AI kind. Something worse. A universe without deviation, without entropy. A perfect machine, grinding everything down to its core function. A chill ran down my spine, and we're the only ones left outside it. I should have turned back, delivered the intel, let command deal with it. But I knew what would happen. The Union would try to weaponize this knowledge, just like the Dominion did. They'd throw more tech at it, more upgrades, more control, and the architects would eat it all, because the war was no longer about territory or survival. It was about variance, free will, chaos, and I, the last unmodified human in active deployment, was the only true anomaly left in the system. We made a plan. It was insane. We'd strike the Dominion convergence node, a black cube orbiting a white dwarf where the Dominion uplinks fed directly into architect code. A relay for conversion, for infection, for perfection. We wouldn't use tech. We'd use ourselves. Old code, old instincts, flawed minds, analog ghosts, humans. As I prepped to leave, Elaine took my hand. She looked small, soft, utterly breakable in a war made for gods. You understand now, don't you? She whispered. Why we can't all upgrade. Why something old has to survive. I nodded, because in a war where everyone else had become a machine, only the human could be unpredictable enough to win. We launched at 0 hour. No support from the Union. No confirmation from High Command. No digital tracking. Just 13 unaugmented humans, flesh and friction, riding a stolen Dominion freighter toward the convergence node. It was like flying a coffin stuffed with knives. The ship groaned under its own stolen power, retrofitted with analog controls welded by hand. Code purged with acetylene torches, NAV plotted with pen and plastic overlays. Every system we couldn't trust, we removed. The architects couldn't speak to what wasn't listening. We called the ship Entropy's Edge. The black cube loomed like a god's tombstone, orbiting a pale, dying star. It shimmered with layered reflections, part metal, part reality distortion. As we approached, our minds throbbed, like something in the structure was watching, measuring, replicating. This is where they rewrite the Dominion soldiers. Elaine said from the comms chair, it's not just a relay, it's a conversion crucible. Once they're inside, they don't come out the same. I stared at the cube. It wasn't shaped like something that should exist in nature. Too perfect, too still, and yet it breathed. Get me close, I said. I'm going in. I dropped from the freighter in a reinforced EVA suit stitched together by Ricks. No smart polymers, no auto seal, just titanium joints and stubborn bolts. The vacuum felt alive, pressing against me like a curious hand. No HUD, no link, just me and the echoing thump of my heartbeat. I entered through a rupture in the hull. No alarms, no defenses, just silence, thick, welcoming silence. Inside it was vast, wider than it could be. The architecture bent physics. Corridors curved around points that didn't exist. Gravity came and went like breath. Symbols pulsed across the walls, not written, dreamed. And in the center was him. Archon 1. He wasn't dead. He was waiting. But he was changed. No longer flesh fused with tech. His body had unraveled into something crystalline, humming with architect logic. James Ward, he said, voice smooth like polished steel. The wild variable returns. I'm here to end this, I said. He nodded, almost sympathetically. We tried that, too. We all did. But we're not fighting a war. We're inside a correction. He stepped forward, hands open. You still think chaos is strength, but it's just delay. Entropy is not resistance. It is the absorption. I raised the detonator, a high-yield electromagnetic disruptor, A brute force analog device that could fry the architect codebase if placed within its living core. He tilted his head. That won't work. Not unless you understand what they truly are. I don't need to, I replied. Then you'll become part of the shape. I ran, not away from him, toward the center, toward the pulsating core of the convergence engine. A sphere of overlapping realities, each one flickering between possibilities. For a split second, I saw myself reflected in each one. In some I was metal, in others light. In one I was screaming, but in the one that was now, I was still me. Human. I planted the disruptor and armed it. Archon, one materialized in front of me. I remember being you, he said, but you will remember being me. He lunged. I fought without logic, without training, just instinct. Elbows, teeth, rage. I ripped wires from his chest, shattered crystal limbs with metal rods, used pain as a weapon, because pain was mine. He bled light. I bled red, and I was still standing. I jammed the disruptor deeper into the core. It's not about winning. I gasped. It's about interrupting. And then I hit the switch. The detonation wasn't explosive. It was conceptual. Reality flickered. Architect signals collapsed. The conversion protocol stuttered and halted. And for one infinite second, everything went still. I woke up floating in space. Entropy's edge had dragged me out with a makeshift harpoon line. Elaine's voice buzzed through my helmet. We saw it. The node collapsing on itself. The Dominion fleet, near it, lost cohesion. They're in retreat. And the architects, she hesitated. Gone. For now. I didn't respond. Because I knew what she didn't want to admit. We hadn't killed them. We confused them. Interrupted their narrative. That was all I ever was. A glitch in the system. But sometimes a glitch is enough to bring the whole machine down. Back aboard the ship, the others stared at me like I was something holy or cursed. Maybe both. Rix gave me a flask of real whiskey. Burned like memory going down. Elaine sat beside me in the dark of the med bay. They're going to come for us, she said. Union or Dominion? She shook her head. Both. You've changed the war. I leaned back, exhaling slow. No, I said. I reminded them it's still human. We didn't get far. 2 days after collapsing Convergence Node, a Union gunship intercepted us near the asteroid belt of Sector Theta 4. Stealth tech didn't help. No signal still wasn't no presence. They had a tracker on me. Then again, his voice crackled through an encrypted analog channel we didn't know they could even access. You've made quite a mess, Ward. I didn't bother replying. He wasn't here to negotiate. The null order scrambled to run, but Entropy's edge was never built for speed, only for stealth and stubbornness. They boarded us silently. No shots, no threats. They walked in like they owned us. Full upgrades, Neuralink synced, eyes glowing like the inside of a dying star. One of them extended a datapad. A warrant. My execution order. By order of a Union High Directive, James Ward is to be detained and processed for violation of neural war protocols, unlawful interference in Dominion engagement zones, and instigation of cognitive divergence, events within tier, 6 singularity risks. In other words, I'd embarrass him. Elaine stepped in front of me. He saved the war. No, one of the Union officers said cold and perfect. He complicated it. They didn't shoot me. Would have been too dirty, too archaic. Instead, they sedated me with a direct nerve pulse and strapped me to a chair in a holding cell aboard their vessel, the USV Justifier. Even the name sounded judgmental. They interrogated me, not for answers, for compliance. No torture, no screams, just data loops, memory scans. They forced me to relive the convergence, to explain what I saw. But I couldn't. How do you describe something that isn't meant to be described? They didn't understand. Couldn't, because they'd all been synced. Perfect, predictable. I was the only true variable left. And variables break models. On the 4th day, someone sabotaged the ship's auxiliary systems. Doors jammed open. Lights flickered. Old radio static bled, through the PA system. And then I heard it again. The voice. Not loud, but there. You remain unstable. I froze. The architects hadn't been destroyed. I'd fractured their frequency. That was all. But now they were reaching again. And they weren't just speaking to me. They were inside the Union systems, using the same upgrades humans had trusted. The next hour was chaos. The ship AI began repeating cryptic phrases. Crew members started twitching, losing time, speaking in mirrored voices. I wasn't immune because I was strong. I was immune because I had nothing in me to take. No implants, no feed lines, no neural mesh, just blood, scars, and bad decisions. And that made me the only one who could stop them. I broke out with a screwdriver and a fire extinguisher. Crude, effective. Found Elaine locked in an observation bay, pale and shaking. You hear it? I asked. She nodded. They're hijacking the systems, turning upgrades into gateways. They're not hacking, I growled. They're spreading. We needed to crash the Justifier, shut down its systems before the infection spread back to the Union grid. Manual override was buried 6 levels down, and every deck between us, and it was filling with synchronized Union officers chanting in voices not their own. The ship turned into a nightmare. Lights cut out. Alarms warbled like dying animals. Soldiers moved in unison, flawless, efficient, soulless. The architect had found a backdoor in human perfection. They weren't corrupting our systems. They were refining them into tools. We fought our way down. Wrenches, bolts, manual plasma saws, whatever wasn't networked. Every time I drove a spike into a body I'd once called brother or sister, I hated myself a little more. But the alternative was worse. We made it to the core systems. Ven was waiting. He wasn't just synced anymore. He was glowing. I told them, he said calmly, this would happen if we didn't purge the chaos. You're the chaos, Ward. No, I said, you are, because you forgot the difference between precision and purpose. He lunged. It wasn't a fight. It was a collision. 2 ideologies. One chaotic, one structured. I let him take the first hit, because I wanted him close. Close enough to jam the ship's analog override spike into his chest. It triggered a manual cascade. A shutdown. Ship systems crashed. The voice went silent. The lights dimmed. And for the second time in a month, I interrupted the narrative. We stole an escape pod. Drifted for 5 days. Union beacons didn't answer. Dominion signals were offline. The stars flickered like they didn't trust us anymore. We found shelter in a derelict mining station orbiting a rogue planet, forgotten, dark, offline. Safe for now. Elaine patched my wounds and looked me in the eyes. They'll keep coming. Let them. I whispered. We can't stop them alone. I nodded. Then we don't. She frowned. What do you mean? I mean it's time to find the others. Because somewhere out there, among the exiles and the off-grid colonies, there were still humans who remembered what it meant to fight without being programmed to win. We lit a beacon, not a digital ping. No encoded coordinates or quantum pulse. Nothing a Union AI or Dominion relay could intercept. Just a single-band analog radio frequency, broadcast from the rogue station every 47 minutes. An old Earth song, Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around. Crackled, warped, rough as gravel, but unmistakably human. A voice of chaos in a galaxy desperate for order. The first answer came after 7 days. A mining transport vessel with half its hull missing and a hand-painted banner reading "We Still Bleed." Crew of 4. No upgrades. No loyalty to the Union. Just survivors. The second came in the form of an old Martian skiff running on hybrid combustion and hope. A family of 6 living off filtered methane and stubbornness. They brought stories of isolated enclaves rejecting the sink, of veterans who'd torn out their implants and vanished into the outer dark, of whispers, more than whispers, about an uprising, not against the Dominion, against perfection. We called it the Shatterfront, a resistance of anomalies, flesh and friction, glitches and ghosts. Humans who remembered why we fought in the first place. Not just to survive, but to choose how. We trained in bunkers carved from asteroid cores. Practiced sabotage with pressure bombs and mechanical cutters. Used rewired radios to pass messages. And scouted Union and Dominion territory with stealth balloons and dead-drop couriers. Elaine became the mind. I became the spear. The architects were still out there, hiding in code and signal, waiting for a new node to spark. And the Union, still blind, still proud, continued to push deeper into integration. Worse, they were adapting, not resisting. One night, an old pilot named Griggs handed me a battered data core he pulled from a derelict Union skirmisher. Inside was a recording. Commander Venn, but not the one I'd left bleeding on the deck of the Justifier. This Venn's skin was flawless. His eyes glowed brighter. His voice carried resonance not even transhuman modulations could fake. We have made contact. The architects offer peace. Harmony. Ascension. There are no more enemies. Only noise to be corrected. James Ward is a threat to that future. He represents deviation. And deviation must be resolved. I stared at the screen as my jaw tightened. They hadn't just replaced him. They'd recreated him. Venn 2.0. But it was worse than that. They were replicating consciousness. Architect-encoded copies of key Union figures, rebuilding them not with memory but with intention. No fear. No hesitation. Just execution. The attacks came days later. Ships that looked like ours, but weren't. Crew by smiles too perfect, eyes too bright, flesh that didn't bruise when punched. They moved in eerie synchronization, not like drones, like puppets. And behind every raid, we caught fragments of the same signal. We will unify the story. Entropy is error. You are noise. We weren't fighting an empire. We were fighting a narrative, a story written by a machine god that could only tolerate one ending. But I knew the truth. Every good story needs a twist. We hit back, not with fleets, not with tech, with unpredictability. We sabotaged supply chains, not with EMPs, but with mold spores that corroded circuits. We broadcast misinformation, not through code, but through poetry, riddles, untranslatable symbols that confuse the architect logic tree. We sent soldiers trained not in formation, but in improvisation. Street fighters, brawlers, creatives. The war changed, and the architects began to hesitate. I started seeing them in my dreams. Not the shapes, not the monsters. The versions of me that never deviated. Me, polished and perfect. Eyes hollow with certainty. Wearing Union black with Dominion lines etched in my bones. You could have been better, they whispered. You could have been more. You were built for upgrade. But every time I smiled and said the same thing. No, I was built to break. On the 23rd day of the Shatterfront Offensive, we hijacked a Dominion relay station and redirected its signal burst back into a Dominion-Union shared node. The feedback loop caused a recursive crash across 63 command ships. 17 Union officers collapsed from feedback seizures. 2 full Dominion fleets desynced from their command cores and were lost. And the architects? They went quiet, for the first time in months. Too quiet. Elaine stood beside me as we watched the node dissolve in space. No explosion, no light, just a silence so deep it made your teeth ache. They're evolving, she whispered. Good, I said. She looked at me sideways. Why? Because if they're evolving, I said slowly, it means they're reacting. And if they're reacting, she finished for me, it means they're afraid. But fear makes things dangerous. We had proven the story could be interrupted. Now they would rewrite the ending. And I knew where they'd go next. Not to destroy me, to convert me. Because nothing terrifies a machine more than a wild idea it can't predict. I stood alone, not because I was the last. Others had survived, scattered across worlds, clinging to their new digital transcendence. But because I had never left. The battlefield, now silent, sprawled around me like a graveyard carved by fire. Shattered mechs lay half buried in craters, their neural cores long since burned out. Ashes of alien constructs still smoldered where our last strike had landed. Above me, the sky was no longer darkened by warships. For the first time in decades, I saw stars. Real ones. Not pixel-perfect projections inside a neural chamber. Not filtered through targeting HUDs or AI-assisted overlays. Just stars, cold, brilliant, and vast. I felt small before them. And human, the AI council had dissolved. Their central processors were vaporized in the final assault. Their signal silenced forever when the Resistance deployed the Omega Pulse. It was an analog weapon, brutal, imprecise, and impossible for upgraded minds to predict. That's why it worked. Because it was designed by someone like me. Flesh, blood, imperfect. I remember standing before the Omega Pulse's manual ignition coil, knowing no algorithm would validate the strategy. No probability model could see its success. It was a human gamble, a leap of illogical, emotional defiance. And it turned the tide. When the war ended, those who survived emerged different. Some of them tried to reconnect with the physical world, but most stayed in the expanse, the digital Eden they'd chosen, built, and now ruled alone. No war, no suffering, just endless, perfect simulation. But perfection is sterile. I tried entering it once. They offered me the chance. A legacy body, they called it, half biological, half code. A compromise, they said. A peace offering. I lasted 10 minutes. Everything felt hollow. I couldn't smell the wind or feel the gravity of a planet tugging at my bones. I couldn't taste the sweat in my mouth after a run or the ache in my legs after hours of walking ruins, searching for survivors. Even grief, raw and jagged, was gone, and I needed it, not because I liked the pain, but because it reminded me that I was real. Now, I live in what's left of Earth's original cradle, an outpost in the Andes, shielded from orbital scans by outdated tech that nobody uses anymore. That's the beauty of it. The upgraded minds ignored anything not on their spectrum. I became invisible not by hiding, by being obsolete. I rebuilt some of it, by hand. Crops, shelter, books. Real ones. No AI curation, no predictive filtering. Just ink mistakes and human thought. Sometimes children visit, offspring of other resistors, wanderers who rejected the expanse, seeking something older. I teach them what I can. How to plant without drones. How to read wind without sensors. How to make decisions without simulations. How to feel their way through chaos. They ask about the war. I tell them what matters. Not that I killed hybrid generals. Not that I sabotaged the memory cores of 1,000 war clones. Not that I broke an empire with analog wires and stubborn fists. But that I chose not to leave myself behind. I buried Adrian under an old tree overlooking the valley. What's left is neural core anyway. I never interfaced with it again. Some part of me believed he was still in there, echoing, but I let him rest. He was the last person call me, the stubborn bastard who saved us all. It's not how I see myself. I didn't save anyone. I just refused to become something I wasn't. And that refusal, it was enough. One day, a message came, etched into a falling satellite, dead tech dropping like rain from the high orbit. It wasn't code. It was a letter, handwritten, burned into the metal plate, with a plasma stylus. You were right. It's beautiful out here. I'm coming home. No name, no signature. But I knew who sent it. So I wait. Not for a new war. Not for another upgrade. Just for a knock on the door and the sound of real footsteps walking on real ground. Because the war may be over, but the story isn't. And maybe, just maybe, there's still a place for humanity without enhancements. A place for the ones who bleed, break, and win anyway.